I went to agencies in Italy, in Florence specifically, and I was like, oh, I want to be a model. Would you like to sign me? And they were like, no. Everyone said, no, we can't sign you. Until one single agency, they were like really kind and they were like, look, we don't really have a market for you here. And that's what he explained to me. And being just rejected and being explained why you're being rejected are two different feelings.
Welcome to the NMF Network podcast. My name is Sonya Barlow. I'm the founder, CEO, and host. This podcast is all about sharing career stories, spotlighting amazing individuals doing extraordinary things. The NMF Network is on a mission to build the careers and confidence of 25,000 people by 2025 through mentorship, masterclasses, and meaningful conversation. This podcast is what you've been asking for. We cover everything from career stories, spotlight extraordinary individuals, all the way to how to overcome imposter syndrome, build on resilience, and just succeed in the way that you want within the workplace. So you're going to Costa Rica for a whole month by yourself?
Yes.
Did you book that on the wing? You were like, just going?
At first, it was like with a bunch of friends, and then everyone just cancelled, and they were like, oh, we can't come. I was like, sure, I'm going. So yeah, I'm traveling for a month to Costa Rica. Maybe people will join, but I'm going to talk to literally wolves and lizards and sloths and whatever I find there. And
there's sloths in Costa Rica? There are
sloths in Costa Rica.
And this is going to come out post Costa Rica trip, for sure. So let's take a little bit of a step back. When you're planning trips with friends, who comes up with the idea?
I've got a lot of friends and they're all like digital nomads. So it's really easy for us to just say, oh, I want to spend a month here or like 3 months in Bali or stuff like that. So this time I was like, well, I want to do that too, because London in November starts to really be sad.
Absolutely.
And gloomy and rainy. And I was like, I want to go somewhere hot and get some vitamin D. And
then you just book the flight?
I did, yeah.
Do you use loyalty points?
No, not yet.
You don't have a loyalty points card like an American Express? Definitely not a sponsored ad, but I would recommend it.
I tried, but I couldn't get one because it was like too soon with the traveling. So I just booked it on a regular credit card that doesn't have miles for now. But will do. If this starts to be a thing, my thing, like traveling as a digital nomad, then probably, yeah. Otherwise, it's just me using one company to fly to Italy every couple of months, and that's it.
And what company is that?
Can we say it?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
It's Welling, the one that I used to go to.
You can say whatever you want. None of this is sponsored, but I use the company's name so that one day they will give me affiliation fees. You know what I mean?
I see.
And do you have membership there? Because a lot of airlines now have memberships.
With Welling, you don't really have any type. You got points and you can spend them throughout the.
So do you actually earn the points? And what I'm trying to ask is, do you book directly from the airline, or do you book through a third party?
And it's done, no, through the airline. It's done like you just get points whenever you book, and then you just spend the points on the next flight. You don't like build up to something big. You can just like spend them from time to time, and it just reduces it of 10.
Okay, well, let's pause that comment for a second, and I will come back to that because that's a really interesting mindset you have that I definitely do not have. But going back to Costa Rica, so your friends and you were going to go. They bailed. You're still going to go. What are you hoping to do for the month? What are you hoping? And then I'd love for you to watch this back after your month to be like, did I actually do any of that, or was I just planning that trip?
Writing a letter to myself in a month.
Absolutely. Via a virtual or a video podcast.
Well, I'm hoping to be quiet and reflect and do a lot of like healing towards my soul and let nature come to me and see more of that. I want to literally breathe oxygen that's real oxygen and see animals in the wild. And I just want to fill my eyes with beauty and richness of nature. That's what I want to do.
Why? I understand, but on another level, like, why do you feel like you should go to Costa Rica for this experience? Why don't you go to Margate?
Have you been to Margate and
Costa
Rica?
Well, obviously, I haven't been to Costa Rica, but I've been to Margate. The reason I say Margate is because I went to Margate a few years ago, and I walked out the train station. I went to the coast, and my nose felt different. I was like, "This is what real breathing feels like." And I was like, "This is 2 hours away from London, and yet I've never breathed so properly or so fresh in the UK." And then I went to Cornwall and I was like, oh my gosh, this is real air. Like, London is not real air. And it's interesting because, you know, we're filming this early November. I just was the face of a Evening Standard article that spoke about noise pollution and air pollution in London, because it is incredible and it's there. And then you bring up the fact that you want to heal from the noise, you want to be silent, you want to, you know, find the oxygen.
In hot weather.
In hot weather, for sure, right? Very important.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like you need that time to yourself? Why do you feel like you need to go quiet?
I feel like you do that in life in sort of periods. You need that. You need that sort of balance between you being reflective and taking time for yourself to try to pack and store the things that you do in a city such as London, which is like constant information, constant hassling, events here and there. And then when do you find the time to actually sit down and understand what's been going on and like pack it all together, see what you want to keep, see what you want to put away? And doing trips in life, you encounter new people, new stories, you understand and try to understand new cultures. You always bring back something from that trip that you didn't have before you left. And that enriches you. And I recommend this to anybody if they have the means, of course. I'm lucky I don't have kids. I don't have a family that I need to attend to. And financially, I'm stable. I can take my job with me. So all of these things I built for myself. I'm lucky and privileged. And it would be a waste not to use that privilege right now to do so these things, you know?
And for those who are watching this thinking that sounds like a great life, Swirl, what is it you do and how did you get there?
So I moved to London to model. That was my aim. I came here already working as a digital nomad. I was teaching English and then I stopped teaching English and I found myself doing social media management because of my personal Instagram profile. I've been doing my own Instagram and social media management for years now. And I had brands that were asking me for tips. And then I just like converted that into a real job, basically. And I also do account management for a creative agency, Female Narratives. So yeah, I've got different clients and I'm fully digital for now, based in London, but I could be based anywhere else.
So you came here to model. Was that like a childhood fantasy or a dream? Or did you build that up over time? Was there something in your life that really pivoted you towards wanting to model?
I can't recall being like a child and wanting to model at all, but it's true that I come from a family that works in fashion. So my family owns a factory and we produce for all of the brands, especially Italian ones, Gucci, Ferragamo, etc.
Why is this the first time I'm hearing this?
And we
What do you mean?
We produce hats and bags.
Do you get goodies?
For them? No.
Oh.
We're just like a third part. We actually get the design and we produce it for them, ship it to their
But I guess my question being is, if you are the third party, what do you do with, have you never then like, not taken a bag because that's stealing, right? But more like any samples that didn't work out, have you been like using them? They're not yours.
No. Whatever you do with the clients, like materials, that raw materials that you use, they own the raw materials, so they can give them back to them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you keep them, you need to keep them stored somewhere and cataloged because everything is copyrighted. So brands own that. If we want to reproduce something like in style or shape, etc., we can always do it. But we're kind of busy trying to already solve all the orders, so it's not something that we usually do. But we have samples that we made with our things, and after a while, if we don't use them, we sell them to people or give them away. So yeah, I've owned many bags and many hats and scarves and etc. accessories, fashion accessories, and I've worked for the factory for almost 7 years when I was younger, right after finishing high school. And then I went into music after that as a tour manager for an orchestra, started my freelancing, always in Italy. And I also started teaching English at the same time, worked for a few venues in Florence as an event manager for like big events. It was great. And then at 25, I started feeling more confident about myself because of therapy and my look. And I used to have this passion for photography, and I did a lot of self-portraits. And then all of a sudden I was like, I really want to try to do this with like other photographers, just not by myself. And I started it. My ex of that time was like, you'll never be a model.
This is the bit I'm going to clip that we could push out to be like, you know, a lot of successful people are fueled by people telling them they can't do something.
Yeah, he was a bit jealous and insecure, and that's on him. It wasn't on me. And I was like, okay, you can literally be present at every single shoot that I do, but I'm gonna do it. We're not together anymore. But that's what I did. I called photographers, friends of mine, started like that, built my portfolio, and then I was like, I want to do this. I love this. And then I went to agencies in Italy, in Florence specifically, and I was like, oh, I want to be a model. Would you like to like sign me? And they were like, no. Everyone said, no, we can't sign you. Until one single agency, they were like really kind, and they were like, look, we don't really have a market for you here. And that's what he explained to me. And being just rejected and being explained why you're being rejected are two different feelings. The second one, the latter, was like, you don't have a market here. Your look, we can't sell it. You have to try Berlin or London.
And here you are.
Yeah.
Before we get on to your look, I just want to go back a little bit. You said you contacted your photography friends and then you started reaching out to modeling agencies yourself. That's really impressive, especially in your kind of mid-20s when you're having a quarter-life crisis. And I only say that because the talent of today, and you must receive so many messages being like, how do I get into modeling? How do I get into modeling? How do I get signed? How do I get booked? And they're kind of afraid to go out and ask. They're afraid to message or DM. They're afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey, here's my portfolio. Are you looking for someone? A lot of individuals that I speak to, they're looking to be found online, or they're thinking magically something's going to happen to them and for you. How important has networking or the power of networks been in generally your career journey thus far?
It's what established me, especially at 25, when you're considered dead in the fashion industry as a model. Like, you usually finish your career by 25 because you start when you're like 13, and the agency builds your career for you. And then at 25, they're like, okay, you're next, you're done. And at 25, I was like, oh, I want to be a model now. And that's the first challenge that you face if you're older and you approach an industry that's like targeting younger people. That's really hard. So you can only go into commercial because they need all sorts of human beings in commercial. And I mean, like ads. If you want to promote a toothbrush, you don't need to be 13. You know what I mean? But I don't have a commercial look. I have an editorial look for now.
What does that mean for the lay person who's listening?
So commercial is anything that you see on websites or things that want to sell their product. So I could be selling the dishwasher soap, you know, and it's just me saying, oh, I love this dishwasher. Or clothes is like what you see in e-commerce websites. It's just a person standing there wearing the clothes. Editorials are those mental crazy photo shoots where people are dressed layered, or like you see them up in the mountains wearing couture. You know, those are editorials. Or like stuff for magazines where you've got wigs and strange makeup, etc. So everything that is extra and it requires a whole team of creatives is editorial. And I've been approached for that way more than selling toothbrush.
And so you came to London. How did you get into modeling when London is so competitive and cold and gloomy, and people are generally just running compared to a space like Italy? And I only know that because I had the luxury and the pleasure and the privilege of studying abroad in Italy for 9 months. And I remember absolutely having genuinely no illness and no headaches and just loving life, because there was an aspect, at least where I was as a student, where it's okay to take things slow. And then you come back to London and people don't want to sit by themselves. They don't want to be in silence. They don't want to be slow. Everything is a chase. It's a game.
Yeah. It's how did I start is really funny. I just came here and there are pages on Instagram where you see a collection of images from different photographers who submitted those images, and they're just collective. And I went into every single page, went into the pictures that I liked, saw who the photographer was that shot it in the credits, contacted the photographer on Instagram and DM'd them, would you like to collaborate with me? And I did that for so long during the day, sending messages to these people that had been blocked. Because Instagram thought I was a bot.
I have also been there. It's so funny. They're like, you can no longer send messages. When I started building my personal brand online, which was 2021 or so, and I wanted to explore fashion campaigns or lifestyle campaigns, and I hadn't, I also would similarly go to companies that I really liked, people's outfits that I was really into, start messaging them and DMing them to be like, hey, do you want to collaborate? And at some point, Instagram was like, you are now restricted for the next 10 days. And I was like, oh, okay, well, clearly there's a point where you need to stop being a beg, basically.
Yes, it was that time. But one person answered me and they were like, yeah, sure, let's shoot. And they were the first photographer I've worked with in London. And after he posted the pictures, I had more leverage for other photographers. And just like you build credit and you build authority. And, yeah, that's how I started. More photographers replied until I finally got to the point where I had a big portfolio. I sent it to different agencies again, because I sent my previous portfolio in a million different ways to the agencies and they all came back with a no. And then in the end, I sent the new portfolio, which was better, I have to admit, and I got signed.
That's such a great story. And do you know why it's great? Because a lot of these learnings that you've said, I try and share online, but also through this podcast and our career advice and through our mentorship. And ultimately what I'm hearing you say is go out and do the work if you want the work, right? Go and find out who you should be contacting, start contacting them, build things maybe on a skill swap basis or a freemium or like a low cost. Invest in yourself, and then don't be afraid to actually re-engage with people even after they've said no.
Correct, yes. Every 6 months, I would do that.
Every 6 months you would do that? How did you know how to price yourself as a model?
I was reaching out to agencies, so you don't price yourself.
Okay. And how does it work when you are signed to an agent?
So in theory, they find work for you, but signed, and this I want to say to all of the models, signing to an agency doesn't mean that you're going to get work. The market is very competitive, especially in London. And once you're signed, it's very exciting, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get work. It means that you have more chances of getting big jobs.
Okay.
Not like the job that pays £125, jobs that have buyouts that pay 5K, 10K, 15K in buyouts. But as you can imagine, unless you're like a very top, like at the top of modeling, these jobs are rare. They come in once every 2 years. So do have a stable income somewhere else. Whatever you want to do, be it like working in a shop or like waitering or doing whatever you want, even if it's like online, but have a safety net, because your agency is not a safety net.
I'm really glad you've said that. And I'm really glad you said it for two reasons. One is because that's a reality. But two is because people feel like they're lesser than because they are balancing two jobs or because they have a full-time hustle and a side hustle. But even myself as a broadcaster or as a podcaster or, as a content creator, whatever I am today, is because I have a business in the background that can support me in doing these things. Otherwise, financially, you can't support yourself. And I haven't gone into modeling. My sister has gone into modeling. She's a model in our family, not me. But I also have found that once I've been signed to agencies for content or speaking or other kind of bits and bobs, they generally take about 20% commission and you can't really negotiate your fees. Is that something that you were aware of at the beginning, or is that something that when you found out, you were like, hey, this is, I guess my point being is, did you always know that was the case? Or were you just so eager to be a model that you were okay with that?
I think it's pretty fair because they put in a lot of work. Agencies, they send you every day different packages to different clients that they have. And it's okay for me. If you're finding the job, it's okay for me for you to take a percentage of what I'm earning. I would do the same. And I'm really glad that we have this agreement because I would never be able to reach by myself those type of clients at the state I'm in right now. Of course, if my Instagram page blows up and then people reach out directly, that's different. But right now, I kind of need them for these big jobs. And there's also a safety of the contract itself that if anything happens with the client, they will reach out to the client. They will get them, they will get paid and they will get back to you. If you have to do that by yourself, you end up not getting anything because you can't take them to court or anything. So,
okay, from a legal standpoint, that's also quite sound.
Yeah.
And so now that you're in the industry, how did you get to a point where, one, you weren't exclusive with an agency? Because I can assume that agencies want you to be exclusive.
They want to, yeah.
But from my understanding of what you do, you're not necessarily exclusive with one.
No, I'm not.
How did you negotiate that?
I negotiated this because at the very beginning, I said, and they agreed, I'm a very difficult person to place. That means I am bald, I am short than a model for catwalks, I am 30, which is a thing. People only, for example, some agencies only sign you if you're below 23 or if you're higher than 1.70 meters. So there are things. So there are all of these things that I'm not, that should be for modeling. And I can't live just with you giving me a job once every 4 years. So I just talked to them and they would say, fair enough. And I said, if you manage to actually make me a living out of this, I don't mind being exclusive with you. It's a mutual thing. It's a mutual agreement. But I'm 30. I need to work. And if something is coming my way, you can't be saying no for me.
And so in modeling, it sounds like there's definitely a level of, would you say, exclusivity or discrimination or a bias that exists? I mean, you've raised the point about your visual look, which we'll jump on. You've raised the point about your height. You've raised it about your age. I mean, I'm 5 foot something. I'm brown. I don't have the modeling, let's say, the model physique. I'm, petiter than average. I'm also in my 30s. So that means for me, it's very unlikely that I'll now be able to go into the modeling space and thrive. And so if I wanted to do that, again, it should be something along the lines of what you've suggested is be on somebody's books, but don't be exclusive to them. And also they don't need you to be exclusive to them because it's not a mutual benefit.
Yes. So there are cases where you can do that and cases where you can't. That's why I usually go for people who are very young because usually they're in school, their family supports them, so they don't need to be non-exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
There is no need for that. They can be exclusive because they don't need that job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now jumping onto your look, and you've shared it yourself. Earlier, before we were recording, I asked you how would one approach the question? And your response was, instead of saying X, say, can you comment on your look? Or, visually have you chosen to look a certain way? And so I guess my point being is, because this is uncharted territory, even for myself, and especially for people that are watching, how would you approach the conversation when it comes to just someone's visual identity? Like, what is the more respectful way of saying, Swirl, you look like this. Why do you look like this?
So because of my look, I get approached with a lot of different questions. And usually when you see someone, your brain is different. Usually when you see someone different from you or the average standard, your brain immediately goes to, why is that person different? And we're just curious human beings. It's just, there's nothing wrong with that. And I always say, keep being curious because that will mean that you will learn something new. and that will serve you in life. So I never get angry at people asking me questions, but I have to say there is a way of asking questions. A lot of people ask me if I have cancer, which is not a way to approach a person.
No, and I feel like people who have cancer don't want to be outrightly asked, hi, forget like, hi, hello. It's like, do you have cancer? Why? Because you don't
have hair.
You don't have hair.
Exactly. So they assume, and this is the assuming that, for example, in Italy, they assume that I have cancer. In the UK, they assume more that I have alopecia because the knowledge and the awareness about alopecia is more than what it is in Italy. So in every country, they assume different things. When I was traveling to Africa, they were asking me, why did you do that? They were like, why did you cut your hair? Because for some of these women, growing hair is so hard. And they were like, why, as a white person, you can grow hair and you just decide to cut them off? So they were a bit pissed about it. So there are different things that can happen. And I guess I get a lot of attention for it. But what I want to say is never ask a person that is different, why do you lack something?
Super interesting.
Other people don't. That's so insensitive. Go more for like, what's your story? And if they want to open up and tell you, they will. If they don't, respect that too. So yeah, the question that you want to ask me is, what's the story behind your look?
So what is the story behind your look?
So my personal story is that when I was 11, I started having this behavior that's called trichotillomania. For many, it's just hair pulling. And it's a type of disorder that comes under the umbrella of obsessive compulsive disorders. But it's a bit different. And it comes together with biting your nails, biting your cheeks, or biting your lips all the time, or getting really angry at those tiny little pieces of skin around your fingers, and also dermatillomania, which is in general skin imperfections, and you want to get rid of them, and you create scars by doing so. So mine was hair pulling. I also was biting my nails, but hair pulling was the one that caught my parents' attention because by the time I was 11, I had pulled all of my lashes and then my eyebrows as well.
Can I ask, does it not hurt?
No, that's the point. Basically, when you have this type of disorder, when you bite your nail, and that's I think biting your nails is so common that people understand it better than hair. But when you do so, and you're so into it in that moment, you get to a point where there is no more nail, and you keep going, and people don't realize what they are doing and that it hurts. It only hurts afterwards when you stop. Your brain just goes into a sort of trance and in an in-between state where what you're doing is actually pleasurable and it's giving you a relief and it's stress relieving.
The reason I smile is not out of disrespect. The reason I smile is because I used to really bite my nails when I was younger. And you're right, it wasn't painful. And I don't know if they still have it now, but I had horrible nails when I was younger. But I always wanted to like have nice nails or wear nail polish, but terrible habit. You would get the yucky nail polish, the nail polish that tastes yucky.
I remember.
And if you bite your nails, you can still bite through that.
Yeah.
And I used to bite through it. I used to sit on my hands. I used to cover my hands. I used to wear, there was a point where maybe I was wearing plasters on all my fingernails so I wouldn't bite them. And the reason I understand that, and I've never really thought of it like that, right? So I'm kind of thinking out loud based on your experience of what you've mentioned is it took a lot of hard work and a lot of discipline to reduce the biting, to reduce the skin, to reduce the management of stress that way. I hadn't realized that any of these things were related or linked, is maybe also what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, they're all related and linked. And also, I want to circle back to a word that you used because it's really funny. You said habit, but it's not a habit.
Mm-hmm.
it's a coping mechanism of your brain because you don't have the tools in that moment when you start doing this. You don't have the tools to redirect your stress or your emotions in a healthy way. So your body and your mind take over and do that for you. And it looks unhealthy, but instead it's kind of saving you from something that you're not managing or you don't know how to manage yourself in that moment.
I'm having one of those light bulb moments basically right now, if that makes sense, because no one's ever said that to me and I've never really myself thought of it that way. But I can see how you are most definitely right. And I can also see how I use the word habit because that's what society has told me that it is.
Correct. I have this podcast now in Italian. I am trying to bring awareness about this in Italy, and that's what I'm most proud in life of. And we built this community together with my friend and psychotherapist, Francesca Zoya, and we talk about this all the time. And we've named our podcast Such a Bad Habit because this is what our grandmothers say to us. Every time we would do something that was kind of weird, like biting your nails, they would just like literally hit your hand and say, stop that, it's such a bad habit. Like you had control over it and you were doing it and you felt ashamed and you felt like you couldn't do it and you had to hide it from people. And then because of how bad it looked, you had to hide it from everybody else. And you felt so insecure about yourself, about your hands all the time. You would hide them. You wouldn't shake people's hands. You would always feel conscious about them every single time. And you grow up like that because it's a habit for other people, but it's not.
Wow, I feel like this is a therapy session that I am having at the age of 30. And a lot of my life is kind of in real time flashing before my eyes, if that makes sense. I didn't plan for it to go this way, but this is why I love these conversations because I love for my own eyes to be opened, right? And two, you don't know what you don't know. So I've never in my life in 31 years or so ever had someone not call it a habit or be able to, justify is the wrong word, be able to explain why that might have been. And to your point, you didn't have the tools, you didn't have the processes, you didn't know what you didn't know. So this is just what you did. And now even sometimes when I get stressed, and I want to be really clear with everyone, I don't feel stress. I don't know what stress is. Because I think I'm always just stressed. You know what I mean? Like, I don't really know the differentiating point between someone being stressed and someone not being stressed. Maybe that's just because I've either blocked it out or I'm just constantly in that line. I feel anxiety, I feel nerves, but I don't really feel stress. But I guess to your point, if I can now in this conversation start recognizing moments where, oh my God, I'm doing something, I will go to my hands to be like, and then I have to stop myself to be like, Sonya, you're growing your nails so they look nice. Or I then start wearing a lot of nail polish, and I did that for so many years. And one of my coping mechanisms, especially at school, that I carried on to work, I would change my nail polish every day and have like really bright colors, even though my nails weren't there. Because I was like, okay, you don't want to bite through the nail polish. You don't want to ruin what you've put on. And so for me, that was like a little bit of a barrier or a boundary. And this is really interesting. It also sounds like a lot of this space that you're now in the headspace that you're in, and the confidence that you have came from therapy.
Correct.
Were you reluctant to go to therapy?
Not really. I didn't have a choice at the beginning because it was so little, and my parents took me to therapy immediately because they were so worried about me. And rightly so, because what you see at the top is me pulling my hair. What you don't see is that I had been depressed since I was 9, undiagnosed. And I had anxiety, genetic, and depression, genetic, and probably ADD, which still haven't been diagnosed because it's impossible to get diagnosed with ADD.
100%, mate.
But I was there in that headspace, and probably I was going so down in those emotions and in darkness that my body was like, wait a second, let me save you from this. This is like survival instinct. But for so long, after I started doing this, after I started pulling, I worked on trying to fight this symptom back with all of the therapists, different schools of therapy. They were all trying to help me fight this, because what my parents wanted and what I wanted was, stop doing this. This is ruining my life. This is making me insecure. This is making me a monster. Why am I like this? Why do I do this to myself? And the shame and the guilt and the anger. When I came into real, like after being a teenager, which is like the worst time ever to get through things and doing therapy, because you don't have a clue of what's going on. You get to work, you start being independent, you have less pressure from like having to have good grades and please your parents and whatever. And then I found this therapist, and she was like, well, we're not here to fight your habit or your disorder. We're here to understand, why are you using this as a tool to feel better and stress-free? What's behind this? Like, your symptom is fine. It needs to be there if you don't have any other tool in life to actually survive these emotions and make sense of them. And so we unpacked all of that for 5 years, and we did it in a way that finally I understood, okay, every time my hand goes to my lashes, it's because I'm feeling something. What's that something that's worrying me? Why? Is it something that I can manage? Is it something that I can manage? And if I do pull a lash or a hair, that's okay too. In that moment, it means that I couldn't find another way to manage it. And, I'll survive without a lash. But
this is such a healthy conversation. Thank you for raising it. And like I said, I'm kind of having like real life flashes before my eyes. One way that I now have tried to manage my own ADHD or my migraines or my bad habits, whatever there might be, is I probably managed it through working so much. Like, I work my life away. I need a purpose. I need to keep busy. But at the same time, I find exercise helps, having a routine helps. But recently, you made this point earlier about when you were going to Costa Rica and the fact that you want to stay in silence. I realized that I actually really like spending time with myself and sitting still and pausing and just looking out the window with a cup of tea helps me to kind of deload and unpack why you're feeling this way, what triggered it, how are you actually coping with it or not coping with it, and being confident enough to go and ask for help, which I think is a really valid point that you've also made, is go and ask for help. And as when you're young, it was your parents who supported you in asking for help, but when you were older, in your 20s, to get therapy, that's your conscious choice. So think about the choices that you're making and unpack that guilt, that shame, or that bad habit, whatever it might be, and really get comfortable with the uncomfortable. What is your advice to especially girls and women who are watching, who want to build up their confidence or who feel slightly insecure, maybe, borderline depressed, and don't know how to get out of that funk?
I'm sorry to say this. There is no short-term solution to this. It's a journey, and it's a journey that will never end, and you will be on this journey for the rest of your life. I hear of women in their 70s, 80s, 60s who are still struggling with their present, because every present has different challenges. What you're living right now is your present challenge, and in 10 years, you're going to have a new one. And that's okay. What you need to be doing is understand that that's not the end of the world. You're facing this today. You can do it. Search for tools, search for people that can help, but also be very kind and understanding with yourself if for that period of time you're not fully yourself, or you don't feel completely whole, or you can't respond to people the way that you wanted to, or you have different ways of approaching things. It's a learning curve. Just try, and this I say because I escaped it for so long, try to be grounded in this presence and in this present moment, even if you don't like it, because escaping it won't resolve the problem.
It's super sound advice. And earlier you touched on your Instagram, and obviously I follow you on Instagram like most people should. You show up a lot on your Instagram, be that what you're wearing, how you're feeling, coping tools, all the way to what your day-to-day looks like. Do you do that for commercial gain, or do you do it from a representation perspective, or do you do it from a place of I'm not really worried about the engagement I'm getting, but it's more about if someone can just feel positively impacted, I've done my role?
I treat my social media a bit as a creative and weird journaling, where I just pour out whatever I feel during that day. I should be more planning my content creation, and I've tried that, but because of ADHD, I feel very overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I always say I post by mood.
Yeah.
And people are like, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't have a strategy. I don't want a strategy. Actually, having a strategy is more work for me than not having a strategy.
It stresses me out.
Absolutely.
My gosh, it stresses me out. But I do agree that if you're a good content creator, you should have a strategy.
I don't think I'm a good one. I think I'm just a content creator. I don't think I'm good. I think I'm just,
Me too. And I understand my engagement isn't like what I would want it to be, but I also think this is the way I do things. And maybe one day I will pay someone to be more structured with my own content creation, and that will be okay too. Sometimes I completely disappear and go off the grid, for like a month. Because
So will you do that when you go to Costa Rica? Is that the plan?
I never know. I never know.
And now that you have verification, you are a model, you have a following, you're clearly confident in yourself as a woman who's in her 30s, kind of activating every part of her life. When you're going on trips like to Costa Rica or traveling trips, do you try and source collaborations or campaigns or any kind of paid gig? Or are you simply going for, I don't want to do any work, I just want to spend time in silence, being able to breathe clearly?
That's a good question. I always tried in the past to source collaborations and trying to get paid gigs whenever I was traveling, because I'm like you. I'm like, work, work, work. Yeah. And I love it. That's why I want it. But I've always found also that if I don't find these collaborations, I end up feeling like I kind of like failed.
I feel like that too.
The trip is less purposeful if I can't do this. And I'm like, wait a second, I am traveling for a whole month by myself in the jungle. And I kind of like feel that is not a purpose in itself.
Or it's not enough. You always feel like it's not enough.
It is. It is. Chill. It is enough. Enjoy. Enjoy the present. You don't have to work every single minute of your day. Just enjoy it. And if anything comes along, that's just a plus of your trip. And that's how it should be.
And earlier, there was a statement that I asked you to pause because we're going to come back to that. That was around the fact that when you fly, especially to Italy, you rack up the points, then you spend it the next month, and it takes you the time off. Whereas one thing I know about myself is I will rack it up until maybe I can do something big with it. The same way that if I buy something new, I will wait for the perfect moment to wear it or to use it or to showcase it. I'm not a perfectionist by any means, but I think I enjoy the chase slightly more, and I enjoy the feeling of, oh, I could get it. Now that I've got it, I don't really need to do much with it, but actually I activated it. And that psychologically is not the greatest thing, especially when you're thinking about loyalty points or traveling, or kind of even like loyalty cards, because that's what they want you to do. That's like, I'm literally, I am looped into American Express, and it's a relationship that I did not want, but now I don't know how to get out of it. And that is the truth of it, right? I don't know what to do without them, but I don't want to be with them. And every time I think of cancelling, I'm like, but what will happen to my British Airways 2-for-1 companion? Oh no, I can't do it. And then I sign someone else up to be like, you can get a voucher, then you can take me on your trip. It's a really terrible relationship I've got going on. But I've recognized it. I'm aware of it. So how do I take a step back? Have you always been careful and conscious with your finances or with your traveling or with your even loyalty points, or, you know, why wait for that big thing to happen tomorrow? Let's enjoy it today. Because it seems like the conversation we've had, you're quite in the present and you're enjoying the now. And it's not like you're chasing the next moment. Whereas comparatively, my ADHD is like, that's great, you've done, what's the next one? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I'm never satisfied. Whereas sitting here with you, I feel like you vibrate satisfaction. You vibrate like you're content with yourself.
For the longest period of my life, I thought I wouldn't live to see the next day. When I was really depressed, I would go back to sleep and think, please don't let me wake up tomorrow. And one day I decided that I wanted to leave, and that was my decision. I was like, I really want this life. I've never wanted this until now, but I wanted it now. Okay. And since that day, I understand if someone buys me a perfume for special occasions, I won't leave it there unopened for special occasions, because every day that I live is a special occasion. If you leave that thing in a drawer, and maybe one day, not because of your decision, but you're not there anymore, someone will find it and think, well, it's still unopened. Every day of her life was a special occasion. I wish she would have used it every day. You know? And so I'm trying to use the perfume every day. And I don't wear any. But I don't know why I use this metaphor of the perfume. But yeah.
I have to say, that this might be one of the most profound and important discussions we've had. I think it might be. Because we've touched on topics that we didn't plan to touch on, firstly. And secondly, we've touched on topics that are real life. And everyone will be listening to and will be able to incorporate something from. But we've also, based on the conversation we've had, reminded ourselves how important it is to be grateful of what you have. Find content in everyday moments. But equally, if you feel like something isn't working, go and either seek help or go and change your life, but on your own terms. What I'm taking away at least is, if you want to go be a model on your own terms, in the way that suits you, but don't expect anyone to come and give you something. You have to go both earn it and ask for it. If you aren't in a good place and your mental health is not where it should be, go and seek help, but from a trained professional who knows much more than you do, and then incorporate that in your daily life.
Because you deserve it.
Because you deserve it. And to that point, you are deserving of everything you have. But sometimes it's okay just to sit in that moment and to chill and to enjoy what you're deserving. Be that going away for a month, or be that just sitting in a coffee shop by yourself and looking out the window, or just being at home but sitting in silence. So Swirl, on that note, I'm going to thank you so much for everything you've shared. I have a lot of work to do on myself after this. So I'm going to go and find a couple of therapists to talk to about all of the all of the behaviors that I both encompass, and that my family watching this, especially my siblings, are going to be like, you definitely have, that you should go talk to someone about. And I just want to say thank you for getting so deep. So if everybody wants to connect with you, which I'm sure they do, how do they find you and where are you?
Yes. So my social media is Miss_Swirl. Anything, TikTok and Instagram. Otherwise, if you are Italian or understand Italian, you can also find me in Comunità CRFC, which is this community dedicated to BFRBs in English. And our podcast is Ma che brutto vizio. So if you're like Italian and are seeking help or have these behaviors or disorders, we're there for you. I always reply to my DMs if they're sensible. Not all of them. Not the one. Please do not ask pictures of my feet. That's it.
That's a different podcast altogether. That's great. Thank you so much for coming on and having me. You can get involved in the podcast by following at NMF Network or getting in touch via hello@lmfnetwork.com. You can also watch the visual podcast on YouTube and Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So make sure you hit subscribe, make sure you join in the conversation and share with all your friends, family, and network because, and we say this, 80% of your opportunities come through your network. And so we really want to make sure that we help you shine.